August 4, 1943, Bovington Camp, England. Morning mist clung to the training grounds, dampening the scent of oil and earth. 3 British Cromwell Mark I tanks and 3 American M4A2 Shermans lined up under the watchful eyes of Major General A.C. Richardson. Over the next 2,000 miles, these machines would be tested not in battle, but against time, terrain, and reliability itself. A trial that would reveal not just engineering, but endurance. The camp was quiet, deceptively so. Mechanics moved with methodical precision, checking tracks, tightening bolts, and polishing vision slits until they gleamed in the weak English sun. Soldiers stood at attention, but even their discipline couldn't hide the tension. Everyone knew this was more than a simple test. This was a rehearsal for war, and machines would speak truths that no report could soften. Major General A.C. Richardson had orchestrated the trial to measure something fundamental. Which tank could endure Britain's roads, weather, and stress without failing? The American Shermans were built for reliability, rugged, steady, unflashy. The British Cromwells promised speed, agility, and innovation, but their engineering had yet to be proven over extended distance. Mechanics whispered about past failures. Engineers revisited diagrams and scribbled notes. The Cromwell, though advanced, had components that were finely tuned and prone to strain. Its engine, designed for bursts of speed, was not always forgiving of long stretches on uneven roads. The Sherman, in contrast, had been refined under American industrial conditions to tolerate wear, tear, and neglect. Soldiers approached their vehicles with a mixture of pride and caution. Captain Priestley of the Coldstream Guards inspected the Cromwell, checking the gearbox and fuel lines. His brow furrowed. "Fast, yes," he murmured, "but can she last the journey?" Across the line, a Sherman crew tightened bolts with steady hands, confident that the design would carry them through. The air was filled with subtle sounds, the scrape of metal on tools, the hum of engines being warmed, and the occasional barked command. Mechanics and crews moved almost silently, understanding that the test would not forgive mistakes. Even the mist seemed to hold its breath, as though the landscape itself knew that the trial would be harsh and revealing. Overhead clouds threatened rain. Tracks pressed into the damp earth, leaving dark impressions that would soon be marred further by 2,000 miles of travel. Engineers double-checked lubrication points and water cooling systems. Crews loaded supplies, maps, and rations. Every preparation, no matter how small, mattered. The contrast between the tanks was immediately apparent. The Cromwell gleamed with sleek armor and angled lines. It promised speed and maneuverability, yet its design revealed delicacy. Tight engine bays, advanced but sensitive suspension, and components requiring constant attention. The Sherman looked heavier, more utilitarian, with broad armor plates and a simple, robust design. It lacked elegance, but every bolt, every track link, every rivet seemed forged for endurance. The first miles of the trial would be deceptively easy. Smooth roads, gentle terrain, and predictable weather. Yet within hours, the difference in philosophy would begin to show. Soldiers joked about speed, but their laughter hid unease. Engineers scribbled initial observations, noting fuel efficiency, engine temperature, and mechanical hum. Even in calm, the Cromwell seemed alert, tense, almost aware of the long journey ahead. The day wore on, and with each mile, anticipation thickened. Major General Richardson observed silently, notebook in hand, capturing data that would later shape armored doctrine. Crews adjusted seats, checked gauges, and whispered to one another about minor squeaks or hesitations. Every small imperfection was magnified in the context of the coming 2,000 miles. For the soldiers, the trial was more than a mechanical test. It was a measure of patience, resilience, and trust. The Cromwell demanded constant attention, skillful handling, and a keen eye for warning signs. The Sherman, while slower to accelerate, allowed crews to focus on navigation, coordination, and endurance. In many ways, the trial was a mirror, reflecting not only engineering philosophies but the human cost of reliability versus speed. As dusk fell over Bovington Camp, the vehicles rested in their bays, engines silent but ready. Soldiers cleaned the exterior, checked fluid levels, and shared quiet meals. They knew the journey ahead would test both man and machine. In the fading light, the contrast between promise and reality was clear. Speed alone could not sustain a campaign, and elegance in design might falter under strain. And as the last mist lifted from the camp, a question hung in the air, almost audible in the quiet. Which machine and which philosophy would endure the long road ahead? August 5, 1943. Britain's roads stretched ahead under gray skies. 3 Cromwell Mark I tanks and 3 American M4A2 Shermans rumbled to life. This was no parade. It was a journey of endurance, of engineering philosophies tested over 2,000 miles. A crucible where steel, men, and design would collide. The engines hummed, low and steady, vibrating through the hands and seats of the crews. Mechanics had performed final checks, but once the vehicles rolled onto the public roads, nothing could be guaranteed. The British Cromwells, light and sleek, accelerated quickly, hugging corners and gleaming with promise. The Shermans, heavier and more deliberate, moved with a steady, unshakable rhythm. Soldiers quickly noticed the difference. The Cromwell demanded constant attention. Throttle, clutch, and gear changes required care and timing. The engine roared with each burst of speed, responsive but sensitive. One crewman muttered, "She's fast, yes, but she's moody. Treat her wrong and she'll remind you." The Shermans, by contrast, felt almost predictable. Their engines were slower to respond, but they tolerated abuse. Crews could shift focus to navigation, road conditions, and communication. Each mile reinforced a quiet truth. Ruggedness often outlasts elegance when endurance is the measure. Weather tested both machines immediately. A sudden drizzle slicked the narrow roads, mud forming along wheel tracks. The Cromwell struggled in places where weight distribution and suspension left it vulnerable to slides or jarring shocks. The Sherman, with its robust suspension and lower engine sensitivity, moved steadily, plowing through without hesitation. Soldiers began logging initial impressions, noting not speed, but consistency and reliability. Captain Priestley of the Coldstream Guards observed quietly, his eyes scanning for early signs of trouble. In his notebook, he recorded minor hesitations in the Cromwell's gearbox, slight overheating in the engines during climbs, and a fuel pump that occasionally faltered under stress. Each note carried a practical weight. Small problems today could become crippling tomorrow. As miles passed, crews discovered the human cost of the Cromwell's demanding nature. Constant adjustments, engine checks, and minor repairs slowed progress. Meals were delayed, rest was intermittent, and the tension inside the crew cabins rose. Conversations shifted from casual banter to troubleshooting. Check the gearbox again. Did the coolant drop? Make sure the chain isn't loose. The Shermans, meanwhile, allowed crews small moments of reprieve. Hands rested on steering wheels, eyes scanned the horizon, and radios crackled with updates. Engineers observing the journey noted that human endurance is as critical as mechanical endurance. A tank that breaks the crew's rhythm can fail long before its engine falters. Road conditions varied widely. Cobblestones rattled under the Cromwell's light frame, while potholes jolted the suspension. Bridges tested weight distribution, and rural lanes demanded constant vigilance. The Sherman's simple engineering allowed it to absorb the shocks of British roads with minimal intervention. Crews adjusted, but the tank rarely faltered. By contrast, the Cromwell occasionally required stops, small delays, but cumulative over hundreds of miles. At each checkpoint, engineers measured temperature, oil levels, and wear. The Cromwell's speed advantage was evident in short bursts, yet over distance the margin narrowed. Small breakdowns, minor overheating, and adjustments added up. The Sherman's steady pace, coupled with predictable behavior, ensured that miles accumulated without incident. The men's fatigue became palpable by the second day, sitting in cramped cabins, adjusting levers, and scanning gauges for hours on end. Crews experienced what Major General Richardson called the endurance of monotony. Here, unlike battle, there were no sudden victories or explosions, only the unrelenting demand for concentration and care. Yet even in exhaustion, soldiers gained insight. Speed is seductive, but endurance saves lives. Midway through the first 500 miles, a minor breakdown occurred on a Cromwell. The crew halted, tools clattering against the steel floor. Oil leaked onto the tarmac, a mechanic wiped sweat from his brow, and a fellow crewman muttered, "Every mile counts," and we're already losing some to her temper. Meanwhile, the Shermans rolled past without incident, a silent testament to reliability over flair. By the end of the first day's journey, observations were clear. The Cromwell was impressive in bursts, agile, fast, and sophisticated. But sophistication demanded attention, skill, and constant care. The Sherman, humble in appearance, quietly demonstrated the value of robust, forgiving design. In the evening, campsites offered a brief respite. Soldiers refueled, inspected tracks, and performed minor maintenance. Mechanics jotted notes about wear and tear. The differences between the tanks were no longer theoretical. Every mile traveled, every adjustment made, was evidence of the real-world consequences of engineering philosophy. The first day ended with a mixture of admiration and concern. Crews respected the Cromwell's agility, but feared cumulative failure. The Shermans earned quiet trust, predictable, unflashy, and dependable. Major General Richardson closed his notebook with a thoughtful glance. The road ahead would test these lessons under varied weather, heavier loads, and continuous travel. As night fell over Britain, engines cooled, and soldiers reflected quietly on the journey ahead. The open road, stretching hundreds of miles through rain-soaked countryside and narrow village lanes, awaited both tanks and crews. One thought lingered, heavier than mist or fatigue. Which philosophy, speed or reliability, would endure the 2,000 miles and the war itself? August 6, 1943. England's winding roads stretched beneath gray skies. The Cromwell Mark I tanks, sleek and fast, began showing the cost of ambition. Meanwhile, the Shermans pressed on quietly, steady as clockwork. For the men inside, every mile now carried frustration, fatigue, and the weight of mechanical uncertainty. The morning air was damp and cold, clinging to uniforms and steel alike. Crews climbed into their tanks, adjusting seats, checking instruments, and preparing for another day of relentless travel. On paper, the Cromwell promised speed, a marvel of British engineering. In reality, the machine demanded constant attention and skill. Within the first few hours, minor breakdowns appeared. A gearbox hesitated, a fuel pump sputtered, and suspension components groaned under stress. Each fault, small in isolation, compounded over the miles. Soldiers were forced to stop repeatedly, dismounting to inspect engines, tighten fittings, and pour oil into overheating components. The first day had been a test of endurance. The second was proving to be a test of patience. Captain Priestley of the Coldstream Guards recorded each delay with clinical precision. Notes detailed time lost, meals delayed, and morale affected. The human cost became clear. Men worked tirelessly, often skipping breaks to coax the Cromwell forward. One crewman muttered under his breath, "Every mile feels like a lifetime, and she's not even halfway to the mark." The Shermans, by contrast, showed no such hesitation. Engines purred evenly, transmissions responded predictably, and suspensions absorbed rough terrain with minimal intervention. Crews could rest hands briefly, communicate more freely, and maintain a steady pace. The contrast was stark. Where one tank demanded attention, the other granted trust. The terrain did little to ease the strain. Hills tested engines, potholes rattled suspensions, and rain slicked narrow roads. Each obstacle magnified mechanical weaknesses. The Cromwell's finely tuned components were prone to minor failures, while the Sherman absorbed punishment with quiet endurance. Soldiers and mechanics noted the irony. Speed was admirable, but it could not overcome the fragility inherent in complexity. Breakdowns carried a tangible human toll. Crews waited hours while mechanics improvised repairs, often with limited tools. Meals were missed or cold. Exhaustion set in quickly. Men grew silent inside their cabins, eyes scanning gauges with tension. Every mile became a negotiation between machine and operator. Each breakdown a reminder that survival depended as much on patience as on skill. Major General Richardson observed these challenges with keen interest. Every report, every note from the field informed a larger understanding. Practical reliability often outweighs theoretical superiority. The Cromwell, brilliant in concept, faltered under the continuous stress of extended travel. The Sherman, simple and robust, demonstrated an unassuming brilliance, endurance as a strategic advantage. In villages along the route, civilians watched as tanks rumbled past. The Cromwell sometimes halted mid-road, crews working under drizzle to restart engines. Soldiers waved apologetically, acknowledging the inconvenience, yet also aware that every delay had meaning. Lessons learned in the slow accumulation of mechanical strain. By midday, frustrations mounted. Crews of the Cromwell juggled minor repairs, communication, and navigation. One soldier wrote in a journal, "I respect the machine, but she demands constant attention. The Sherman may lack her flair, but she lets us breathe. That's worth more than a few miles per hour." Even small failures carried symbolic weight. A snapped track or a jammed gearbox reminded men that speed alone could not carry them to victory. Each repair, each improvised solution, was a reminder of human ingenuity in the face of imperfection. Crews learned to work around limitations, to anticipate failures, and to adapt quickly. The Shermans, meanwhile, pressed forward without incident. Their reliability became a quiet morale booster. Soldiers could plan meals, rest schedules, and coordination without fear of unexpected stops. In every mile completed without incident, the contrast between design philosophies became more evident. Endurance, predictability, and robustness were quietly outpacing speed and sophistication. By evening, campsites became a scene of reflection. Soldiers and mechanics of the Cromwell crews shared quiet frustrations and grudging respect for the machine's engineering. The Shermans were inspected, refueled, and cleaned with minimal concern. Major General Richardson recorded observations meticulously, noting delays, repairs, and morale. He understood that the real test was not mechanical alone, but human. How crews coped with stress, fatigue, and repeated setbacks. Despite the failures, the Cromwell crews persisted. They adjusted, repaired, and coaxed their tanks along, demonstrating resilience, ingenuity, and courage. Yet the narrative was clear. Brilliance in design could falter under the relentless test of endurance. Meanwhile, the Shermans quietly proved that practicality and durability often determine success in wartime operations. At night, as rain-slicked roads cooled and engines rested, soldiers reflected. The journey had already revealed truths that blueprints and simulations could not. Speed had limits. Reliability defined outcomes. Captain Priestley, tired and damp, scribbled in his notebook, "We fight not only the terrain and the clock, but the machines themselves. And some machines fight back harder than any enemy." The question lingered in the misty English night. Can engineering brilliance alone overcome the daily, grinding test of endurance? Or is steady reliability the true victor on the long road of war? August 7, 1943. Britain's back roads stretched wet and gray under persistent drizzle. 3 Shermans and 3 Cromwells pressed onward, engines humming, crews weary but determined. The 2,000-mile test was no longer theoretical. It was a crucible where endurance, engineering, and human resolve collided on every mile of asphalt and mud. The day began with low clouds pressing over the training grounds. Crews climbed into their cabins with heavy hands and heavier thoughts. The Cromwells, still sleek and fast, had already exacted a toll on their operators. Minor breakdowns, delayed meals, and constant vigilance had stretched patience thin. Each mile demanded attention, each mechanical groan a reminder that speed had a price. The Shermans, in contrast, rolled forward with an unassuming confidence. Engines were steady, transmissions predictable, and suspensions absorbed uneven terrain with minimal complaint. Soldiers could rest hands briefly, share conversation, and navigate with focus. Each mile completed without incident reinforced a quiet truth. Reliability wins over brilliance when the journey is long and relentless. Road conditions varied. Cobblestone villages jostled tracks and cabins. Muddy farm lanes tested traction. Narrow bridges required careful crossing. The Cromwells occasionally faltered. Overheating engines, tense gearboxes, and minor track misalignments demanded attention. Mechanics and crews dismounted to correct issues, often under drizzle and fatigue. The human cost was visible in tired eyes, tense shoulders, and muttered frustrations. Captain Priestley of the Coldstream Guards noted the impact on morale. Crews of the Cromwells moved like cogs in a stressed machine, reacting to every warning, every hesitation. Meals were late, conversations sparse, and sleep fleeting. One crewman remarked, "She's brilliant, yes, but she wears you down before the road even ends." Meanwhile, the Shermans moved steadily. Minor adjustments were routine, not urgent. Soldiers could anticipate road hazards, communicate freely, and conserve energy. The contrast was growing sharper with every mile. Where the Cromwell demanded constant vigilance, the Sherman offered predictable endurance, allowing crews to function at full capacity over long stretches. Engineering observers noted patterns. The Cromwell's design, optimized for speed and agility, revealed vulnerabilities under sustained use. The light armor and high-revving engine, while advantageous in short operations, required frequent intervention. By comparison, the Sherman's robust frame and simplified mechanics tolerated abuse without complaint. Over time, mechanical reliability proved as decisive as weaponry and operational effectiveness. Weather added complexity. Persistent rain reduced traction, visibility fell under thick fog, and riverside roads became treacherous. Each challenge exposed the Cromwell's limits: slipping tracks, overheating engines, and suspension strain. Crews adapted, improvising repairs and recalibrating expectations. They learned that ingenuity and patience were as vital as driving skill. The Shermans, undeterred, continued their measured pace. Engineers watching noted the value of simplicity: fewer breakdowns, fewer delays, and more consistent daily mileage. Where the Cromwell consumed energy and morale, the Sherman conserved both. This quiet efficiency was shaping the narrative of the trial: endurance over speed, predictability over flair. By midday, a pattern had emerged. Cromwell crews were fatigued, meals delayed, and progress uneven. Sherman crews moved forward with near-constant efficiency, maintaining average speeds comparable over long stretches. Data recorded by Major General Richardson and his staff showed growing divergence, not in potential, but in real-world performance. The human element remained central. Soldiers adapted to the quirks of their machines, improvising on the fly. Broken panels were secured with wire, overheating engines cooled with makeshift solutions, and minor breakdowns became lessons in patience. The trial was no longer about speed alone. It was a measure of endurance, resilience, and the interaction between man and machine. Even as fatigue deepened, lessons were internalized. Crew members of both tanks observed how design choices affected life on the road. The Cromwell's speed could not compensate for the stress it imposed. The Sherman's lack of elegance was irrelevant compared to the confidence it offered crews over thousands of miles. Soldiers began to value predictability, durability, and mechanical forgiveness over flash or sophistication. By evening, campsites offered moments of reflection. Tanks cooled, tracks were cleaned, and crews performed routine inspections. The contrast remained clear. The Cromwells were impressive but temperamental, while the Shermans were steady and dependable. Soldiers shared observations, quietly acknowledging the truth revealed by experience. In war, the practical often outweighs the theoretical. Major General Richardson, reviewing notes and reports, recognized the broader significance. The trial was not just about which tank performed better. It was a study in engineering philosophy, operational reality, and human endurance under sustained pressure. The road tested more than engines. It tested patience, adaptability, and the cumulative effect of stress on men and machines alike. As night fell over England, rain tapping gently on steel hulls, the crews reflected on the day. Every mile traveled, every minor breakdown, every smooth stretch reinforced a central lesson. Long-term reliability is more decisive than short-term speed when survival and operational efficiency are on the line. And as the campfire smoke mingled with mist over the roads, one thought lingered among the soldiers and engineers alike. In the endless grind of war, who truly prevails, on the swift or the steadfast? August 8, 1943. Britain's countryside stretched under a low, gray sky. 3 Shermans moved steadily along rain-soaked roads. The Cromwell struggled behind, engines groaning and crews tense. Every mile revealed not just mechanical truths, but the human cost of design, endurance, and expectation. By the 5th day of the journey, the Cromwell's limitations were no longer theoretical. They were visible, tangible, and persistent. Engines overheated after extended climbs, gearboxes hesitated, and tracks sometimes misaligned. Minor faults had accumulated into repeated interventions. Crews had grown adept at improvising, yet the stress of constant vigilance left fatigue etched into their faces. Captain Priestley noted that even small delays had ripple effects. Meals were late, rest periods shortened, and morale wavered. Soldiers learned to anticipate potential breakdowns, carrying tools, spare parts, and ingenuity as vital supplies alongside fuel and rations. Every repair reinforced a quiet, sobering lesson. Mechanical sophistication without reliability could undermine human endurance. By contrast, the Shermans moved forward with remarkable steadiness. Engines hummed predictably, transmissions engaged smoothly, and suspensions absorbed the uneven terrain of rural Britain. Crews could plan around the predictable performance of their tanks, allowing small periods of rest, conversation, and observation. Where the Cromwell drained energy, the Sherman conserved it. Not flashy, but remarkably effective. Engineers and observers at checkpoints recorded data meticulously. Temperature readings, oil levels, and track wear told one story. The human reactions of crews told another. The Cromwell, though technically impressive, demanded a level of attention and skill that gradually sapped the operator's energy. The Sherman, meanwhile, reinforced the principle that durability and simplicity were strategic advantages in long operations. Soldiers began to reflect on what these lessons meant for the broader war effort. Speed was seductive. It promised maneuverability and tactical advantage. Yet in sustained operations over hundreds of miles, it became clear that reliability determined operational effectiveness. The Cromwell's failures highlighted the hidden cost of innovation. A machine could be brilliant in bursts but falter under constant strain. Minor breakdowns continued, and the Cromwell crews adapted. One engineer fashioned a temporary fix for a slipping track. Another devised a method to cool an overheating engine using whatever supplies were on hand. Each solution required skill, patience, and teamwork, qualities that war demanded, yet ones that could not fully compensate for mechanical fragility. The Sherman crews, meanwhile, documented a different kind of lesson. Predictability breeds confidence. Soldiers could maintain steady schedules, conserve mental and physical energy, and focus on coordination rather than constant problem-solving. This quiet efficiency, though less dramatic than repairing a broken Cromwell, proved vital over the long distance of the trial. By midday, the contrast had become a lesson in engineering philosophy itself. The Cromwell's design represented innovation and speed, but with a price: constant oversight, high crew engagement, and vulnerability to cumulative wear. The Sherman embodied pragmatism, less flashy but more forgiving, and ultimately more effective in real-world conditions. Observing officers began compiling reports that would influence British armored doctrine. They recognized that a tank's battlefield speed was meaningless if the crew spent more time repairing it than advancing. Conversely, the American philosophy of reliability ensured that operational momentum could be maintained, a principle that would resonate across campaigns and continents. The human cost of mechanical failure was undeniable. Soldiers wrote in diaries about long delays, frustration, and exhaustion. Captain Priestley's notes reflected the psychological burden. Constant vigilance, anticipation of faults, and the strain of improvisation wore on men as surely as the physical terrain. In many ways, the trial had become a study not only of machines, but of human resilience and endurance. By the fifth evening, the pattern was evident. The Shermans had accumulated distance efficiently, with minimal interruption. The Cromwells, while still capable of bursts of speed, had required repeated stops and repairs. Crews of the latter had grown fatigued, adapting to challenges in ways that revealed both skill and the toll of unrelenting mechanical stress. Lessons extended beyond the crews to the engineers observing the trial. They noted that design decisions carry consequences far beyond theory. Material choices, tolerances, and engine configurations interact with human stamina and operational reality. Speed and agility, no matter how elegant, could not substitute for robustness and endurance. At the evening camp, crews and officers gathered around maps and notebooks. Observations were exchanged, minor repairs discussed, and strategies for the remaining miles planned. The lesson of the trial was becoming clear. A successful tank is not merely a machine, but a partnership between human and design, one that favors endurance, reliability, and the practical over the spectacular. Major General Richardson summarized the day in his notes. This is not a contest of ingenuity alone. It is a measure of sustained performance, human adaptability, and the hidden value of reliability. Speed alone does not carry victory. Resilience does. As night fell and engines cooled, soldiers lay in their bunks, reflecting on the miles covered and the lessons learned. The Cromwells demanded respect for their engineering brilliance and the skill required to operate them. Yet the Shermans quietly proved their superiority through consistent, dependable performance. And in that quiet reflection, a central question emerged. In war, is it better to be brilliant but fragile, or steady and enduring? And which will history remember as true effectiveness? August 12, 1943. Bovington Camp and the roads of Britain lay behind 6 tanks that had traversed hundreds of miles. The Cromwells bore the scars of their journey, overheating engines, worn tracks, and weary crews. The Shermans rolled quietly, dependable and unbroken. Now the trial was over, and the truth of design, endurance, and human cost would be laid bare. The final day of the 2,000-mile trial revealed not just mechanical performance, but the consequences of philosophy in steel, men, and motion. Every scratch, dent, and worn track told a story of cumulative stress, endurance, and human adaptation. Engineers, mechanics, and soldiers gathered to record observations, compare notes, and assess lessons learned from weeks of relentless travel. The Cromwells, fast and sleek, had demonstrated bursts of agility that impressed observers, but the pattern of failure was undeniable. Engines that overheated under prolonged strain, transmissions that hesitated at critical moments, and suspensions that faltered over rough terrain highlighted a reality engineers had long feared. Speed without durability could compromise operational effectiveness. Captain Priestley, after weeks of logging repairs and delays, reflected on the human cost. Soldiers endured long waits, improvising solutions, and sacrificing rest and meals. "We respected the machine," he noted, "but it demanded more from us than it gave back." The crew became part of the engine, and sometimes that union faltered. Minor breakdowns, repeated interventions, and cumulative fatigue revealed that even a brilliant design can become a liability when it cannot sustain real-world conditions. In contrast, the Shermans moved through the trial with quiet resilience. Engines ran steadily, suspensions absorbed shocks without complaint, and transmissions responded predictably. Crews could anticipate performance, plan rest, and maintain operational focus. By the trial's end, the Shermans had completed the distance with minimal intervention, demonstrating that durability, predictability, and forgiveness in design were as decisive as firepower in combat. Engineers reviewed the data carefully. Fuel efficiency, mileage, temperature readings, and component wear were all meticulously recorded. Beyond the numbers, however, the human element provided critical insight. The Shermans allowed crews to function with less stress and greater continuity, proving that the practical impact of design on human endurance could be as crucial as the machine's specifications. The trial also revealed the limits of theoretical advantage. The Cromwell's speed, while remarkable, could not compensate for repeated interruptions, delayed logistics, and crew fatigue. Each repair consumed time and energy, reducing the practical distance achieved over a long operational journey. The Shermans, though less flashy, maintained momentum. Over long distances, this quiet advantage proved strategic, a lesson not in speed, but in sustained capability. In debriefings, officers discussed the broader implications. British armored doctrine had long prized speed and agility, assuming these qualities would confer battlefield superiority. Yet the trial highlighted a stark truth. Tactical brilliance is insufficient if machines cannot reliably traverse terrain, endure prolonged operations, and sustain their crews. Engineers and commanders alike recognized that operational reliability must guide both design and strategy. Soldiers shared their experiences, describing the cumulative strain of managing delicate machinery under constant attention. Repairs were improvised, patience tested, and morale stretched thin. By contrast, the Sherman crew spoke of quiet confidence, predictable performance, and the ability to conserve mental and physical energy for decision-making, navigation, and tactical response. These human narratives underscored that war is not only fought by machines, but by those who operate them under stress. The trial's findings began to shape doctrine. The superiority of the Sherman in long-distance, real-world conditions suggested that reliability and robustness were more critical than raw speed or sophistication. British engineers took note, considering future designs that could balance agility with endurance, learning that innovation must always be tempered by practical application. Photographs captured the aftermath, Cromwell's with dents, scratches, and temporary fixes applied in the field. Sherman standing quietly, clean and mechanically sound. The visual record reinforced the narrative. Endurance, predictability, and resilience outlast flashy promise under sustained pressure. Major General Richardson summarized the trial in a formal report, emphasizing lessons that extended beyond mechanical engineering. This is not merely a test of tanks. It is a study of philosophy in steel, human endurance, and the intersection of machine and operator. The battle is not only fought in combat, but along the roads, across terrain, and in the quiet labor of maintenance and vigilance. soldiers reflected on the trial's personal lessons. They understood that mechanical brilliance demanded attention and that failure was rarely sudden. It emerged incrementally with each mile, each minor fault, and each delay. The Shermans' quiet reliability, in contrast, reinforced a principle that would guide operations in theaters around the world. Consistency and endurance often determine operational success more than raw capability. As the sun set over the English countryside, the trial's results were clear. The Cromwell had demonstrated potential, skill, and speed, but it exacted a cost in manpower, time, and sustained effort. The Sherman, simple, robust, and dependable, quietly proved its superiority in practical conditions, validating the philosophy that had guided American armored engineering for decades. In the quiet reflection that followed, a sobering truth emerged. Wars are not only won through tactical brilliance or innovation, but through machines and strategies that survive the test of endurance and the men who endure alongside them. And as night fell, engines cooled and soldiers rested. One question lingered in the minds of engineers, officers and crews alike. In the crucible of war, what truly defines success, the promise of brilliance or the power of reliability? August 1943, the 2,000-mile trial was complete. The Cromwells bore scars of strain and the weight of expectation. The Shermans, steady and unbroken, had quietly proven their worth. Now, history would remember not only machines, but the lessons learned on roads, in engines, and in the hands of men who endured. The final days of the trial had passed, but its echoes lingered long after engines cooled. Soldiers dismounted, crews cleaned and repaired what they could, and engineers compiled meticulous records. Photographs captured the tank's battered frames, the Cromwells dented, patched, and weary, the Shermans standing clean and mechanically intact. These images became more than documentation. They were symbols of a broader truth. Endurance matters as much as innovation, and reliability often dictates survival. The implications of the trial reached far beyond Bovington Camp. British engineers revisited Cromwell designs, considering lessons learned about suspension, cooling, and durability. American officers studied their Sherman's quiet performance, confirming that robust, forgiving engineering could sustain operations across continents, climates, and prolonged campaigns. The trial had offered not just proof, but a blueprint for practical armored warfare. For the men who had driven and repaired these machines, the trial was a crucible of experience. Soldiers reflected on the hours spent coaxing temperamental engines, navigating treacherous roads, and improvising repairs in drizzle and fatigue. They understood that a tank's success is inseparable from the crew's endurance, and that every design decision carries human consequences. Captain Priestley's notes captured this insight with quiet clarity. A machine may promise brilliance, but only reliability allows men to endure. Engineers and military strategists analyzed every metric: fuel consumption, average speeds, maintenance requirements, and component wear all told one story. The Sherman's design allowed crews to maintain operational momentum with minimal interruption, while the Cromwell demanded constant attention, even when conditions were moderate. This data informed not only tank development but strategic thinking about the deployment of armored forces. Beyond statistics, the trial left an indelible impression on doctrine and training. British crews learned the cost of complexity under sustained operations, and future designs sought to balance speed with durability. American doctrine validated its emphasis on rugged, forgiving machines, capable of enduring miles of travel, variable terrain, and the unpredictable stresses of combat. The road had revealed the enduring truth of practical design. Reliability saves lives, preserves momentum, and sustains campaigns. Photographs, reports, and diaries preserved these lessons for posterity. Soldiers wrote of fatigue, ingenuity, and quiet frustration. Mechanics documented repairs and improvisations. Officers recorded tactical observations. Together, these accounts formed a mosaic of human experience intertwined with engineering, proving that war is waged not only in battle, but in the endurance of men and machines over time and distance. The trial also left subtle marks on culture and memory. Veterans of the journey remembered the contrast between tanks, reflecting on how philosophy and design shaped daily life on the road. Stories of delays, mechanical ingenuity, and steady progress circulated quietly, forming an oral history of endurance and practical learning. Even in the absence of combat, lessons of reliability, teamwork, and resilience endured. The Cromwells, despite their flaws, were not forgotten. Their speed, agility, and technical sophistication influenced later British designs. Engineers extracted lessons from failures about suspension stress, engine heat tolerance, and human-machine interaction, ensuring that each shortcoming became a stepping stone for improvement. The Shermans' success, meanwhile, reinforced American engineering philosophy, proving that robust, predictable machines could shape operational outcomes and secure victory across theaters. As the war progressed, these lessons translated into tangible impact. Sherman tanks, reliable over thousands of miles, enabled advances, sustained supply lines, and supported infantry with confidence that mechanical failure would not halt operations. British armored forces incorporated insights from the Cromwell's limitations into training, maintenance practices, and subsequent tank designs. The trial's quiet influence extended far beyond its immediate results. For the soldiers, the legacy was personal as well as mechanical. They had learned that endurance, of men, machines, and strategy, is central to survival in war. Every repair, every careful adjustment, every mile of steady progress had reinforced a simple truth. In war, as in life, consistent performance often outweighs brilliance, and so the trial became more than a test of tanks. It became a testament to human resilience, practical engineering, and the quiet victories of endurance over spectacle. Crews returned home with hands stained by grease and notebooks filled with insight. Engineers carried the lessons forward into new designs, while historians would later reflect on the trial as a window into the realities of wartime decision-making, innovation, and the human-machine bond. In archives, photographs and reports sit quietly, a reminder that history favors not only those who innovate but those who endure. The tanks themselves, some preserved, some scrapped, some forgotten, serve as monuments to lessons learned on misty British roads, under gray skies, in the hands of men who measured the cost of speed against the power of reliability. And as museums display tanks and maps, as archives hold reports and diaries, one final thought lingers. War doesn't vanish. It changes its shape and waits to be rediscovered, teaching lessons in endurance, resilience, and the quiet power of reliability.